Morning. Before we get going with the proceedings of the day, I'd like to request that we quickly go through a safety briefing, and I would like to request Ms. Audrey Mamokobo to take us through a safety briefing quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Audrey Mamokobo. I'm a safety specialist responsible for TFR buildings in Parktown area. In case of emergency, I will be your evacuation leader. For evacuation facilities, for those that are not familiar with the place, you go to the right-hand side for male and female. You see the signages for female and the signages for male. And for those that are smokers, we don't smoke within the building, we smoke outside. We go through the lift, there's a provision made for smokers outside. And should there be any emergency, please do not panic. You will hear the messages and you will only move after the instruction. I'll be your evacuation leader for the duration of your meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. And it's good to note that we are all clear around safety protocol in the event of an emergency. As indicated earlier, at a high level, the purpose of today is for us as Transnet to briefly share, most importantly with our customers, but also with our colleagues and our partners in the media space, our recovery plans as we've just come out of the strike. We have been engaging our customers quite extensively during and post the strike in ensuring that there is full alignment with regards to some of the activities that were taking place, but also most importantly on how we as a partnership work together to get the system back into full operations. And for that reason, we felt it would be just that we open up and share a bit about what we've gone through, but most importantly, what we intend to do henceforth in our efforts to clear the impact of the strike. I do note that we have a few colleagues that are joining us online, representing quite a number of media houses, and our colleagues as well that are managing corridors across the country are also joining us online. I'd like to briefly ask that we have a brief introductory session, especially for our colleagues that are joining us online, and starting off with our managing executives. If Ali, if you can maybe just confirm you can hear us. Sound is a bit too low. Can we adjust that? I'm not sure if it's on your end, Ali, but let's try it with Russell. If you can quickly introduce yourself.
Good morning, good morning to everybody. My name is Russell Baikis, Managing Executive for the Cape Corridor for Transnet Freight Rail.
Thank you, Russell. Ali, if we can give it a try again.
Okay. Can you hear me this time, Bonginkosi?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good morning, Ali Matanda, Managing Executive for the North Corridor.
Thank you, and a warm welcome to you, Ali. We also have in the room from our colleagues that are managing corridors, Rudzani, if you can briefly just introduce yourself, sir.
Thanks, Bonginkosi. And good morning to everyone. My name is Rudzani Ligege. I'm the Managing Executive for the Container Corridor.
Thank you. And Mashudu?
Good morning, Mashudu Makatu, Managing Executive for the Central Corridor.
Thank you, Mashudu. And then going back online, we have Theo, who manages our O corridor. Theo?
Good morning to everybody. My name is Theo Johnson. I'm the Managing Executive responsible for the O corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Theo. And lastly, from our colleagues that are online, Tozama.
Yes, good morning, everybody on the line and in the room. My name is Tozama Kwena. I'm the Managing Exec for the Northeast Corridor.
Tozama, we can't see your face, but nonetheless, I'm happy you can hear us. I will ask our CE to introduce. That's fine, Tozi. I think we'll proceed. Hopefully when you maybe later on come up, the camera will work. I'll ask our CE, Sizakele Mzimela, to introduce herself when she steps up to share one or two words with our partners. This is me trying to be strategic here in introducing my colleagues, because I know when the heavy questions come, I will have somewhere to hide. So please fire away to my colleagues if there is a need. Thank you. As I've said, so the primary purpose of the day is for us to share with you where we are insofar as recovering from the strike, but most importantly also just highlight some of the grounds that we've covered from the day that the strike was lifted on Wednesday evening. And without further ado, I'd like to request that we allow Ms. Sizakele Mzimela to briefly talk us through what principles we actually used to get to the point where, yes, you need to come here, unfortunately. So she will talk us through what principles we put in place in order to ensure a speedy and efficient recovery from the strike. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bongosi. But I think that the introductions are not quite complete, because we do have other executive management colleagues who have joined us as well in the room. So in the interest of time, I will just go around the room and introduce them very quickly. And I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to hear their voices a little bit later if there are actually questions that come up that are directed at them. Starting, with Gregory. Gregory there, you can just raise your hand. Gregory looks after our people's portfolio. I'm standing in for Carbonina, who is on leave, today. Next to Gregory is our CFO, Marilise. Sorry. And then down the table to the right is Marius and Shamil, who head up our security portfolio. And next to Marius is Bessie Mabunda. Bessie is our GM of planning, and she also oversees the OCC environment. So would have actually played a very critical role in putting together some of the principles that I will be sharing with you in ensuring that we're able to recover operations as quickly as possible. And I think that is it. In terms, if I've left anybody out, it's not because, Mike, down there, Mike in our comms communications department. Apologies, Mike. So as Bonkos has already indicated, I think for us what was actually critical was to at least come up with principles to ensure that there was a fair way of recovering our operations, in understanding and appreciating that a number of our customers would be quite anxious to have their trains to start to move ahead of everybody else. So what we did, and this is something that was shared with the customers as well, is that we shared the principles that we would apply to ensure that there was fairness and transparency in starting to move the trains again. The first thing that we needed to deal with in the first hour was just to ensure the safety of operations. And that entailed, line inspections. So what we do in that respect is that we run what we call trolleys along the whole network, just to make sure that there isn't anything that could cause harm to the movement of the train or anything of that sort. So all of that needed to be cleared. And as you can well imagine, that after taking a strike, there are portions of our network where there was a little bit more work that we needed to undertake prior to the safe running of trains. The second bit was the inspections of what we call our rolling stock, which is both our locomotives and our wagons, because they had actually been standing for a number of days, and there was a requirement that we inspect them and ensure that they are ready once again, for operation. Lastly, but most importantly, which is not reflected in this slide, is that when we talk about safety, we equally needed to make sure that even our people as well were safe, to operate the trains. They were ready, for operations. Especially because they had been away from work for a couple of days. There are normal checks that we run whenever employees come into the operating environment, but we just upped the work that we needed to do in preparing for safe operations once again. Now, post, the first couple of hours of our recovery plan, we then had to start to unblock the network. And what I mean by that is that when the strike started, essentially what happened is that there were certain trains that ended up being left, on the line, en route to their destination, which meant that we needed to clear those trains before we could go back into normal operations, because they were effectively blocking, at the line. And just to give you a sense of what we're talking about is that we had a total of 257 trains that were actually stuck online that we needed to clear. We call these staged locomotives in various parts of our network. So that's what was the key issue that we also need to focus on. And then second to that, we had to start to move some of our maintenance, trains, or the trains that were carrying maintenance material, because a large part of what we also needed to deal with was the repair of the various parts of our network where a significant amount of cable was stolen. And I think a minute later on you will hear from one of the managing executives who's still challenged even now in trying to finalize the clearing of all of the cable and everything else that was stolen during that period. And then, of course, priority was given to the trains that were carrying hazardous material, and also some of the fruit and so forth, which we thought had the potential to spoil. And then we followed through, with trains that were chasing vessels, where vessels were already at port. We prioritized, those, as well. And then fifth, in terms of that category of prioritization, was also trains where that were carrying material that had the potential to close down a plant. So I think that you'd be aware as media that there were some ammonia, trains that were stuck, or staged during the strike, and we ensured that we provided priority to some of those trains as well. Once all that was cleared, then it really, once again, was to try and get us now into the performance, catch up in terms of starting to return to what we call the normal integrated train plan, which is effectively where we believe that at that point we're operating trains as per normal and applying the rules that we would normally apply in prioritization of trains. What I am happy, to report is that we did achieve, or at least clear or deal with the first bit, which is the safety bit, relatively quickly. And all of that was completed in the first few hours. In terms of the second block that we've indicated there, which is the unblocking of the network, as indicated, we had the 257 stage trains, and as of this morning, 234 of those have been cleared. Unfortunately, we still have 23 trains that remain staged. And this is as a result of the cable and everything else that was stolen, in particular in the container corridor. But I'm pretty sure Rutsane will then speak to that. Most corridors have now returned to normal operations, and the volume performance on Sunday was over 100% for corridors such as the North Corridor and the All Corridor, and we're beginning to see pickup as well from the other corridors as well. The North Corridor was still hampered by a derailment that occurred in an area called Phokeng, which we only managed to clear on Sunday night, but that one has now been cleared. So as of now, I mean, the trains are also now beginning to move pretty well. On the northeast corridor, we had, I mean, the advantage of being able to move the trains through to Maputo as well, because it's the one corridor that operates to two ports. It operates to the Maputo port and also to Richards Bay. So even during the strike, there was still some movement into the Maputo port, but they are now fully operational as well, now that everything is back on track. As indicated, the one area of concern, I mean, is the container corridor, where we did experience an abnormally high level of theft incidents, I mean, during this period, and they've been continuously repeating. So we are able to move trains up to a particular level, and it's a stop-go type of operation at this stage, because once we've cleared the cables, what we find is that further on, there would be another incident of theft of cable, which really has seriously hampered the movement of trains on the container corridor. That provides just an overview of all of the corridors and where we are. But we thought, in addition to that, what we would do is to go into some of the specifics within each of the corridors, in terms of, I mean, what has actually been moved and how each of those corridors is currently, I mean, performing as we speak. And I believe, I mean, the first corridor that we will be going through would be the Cape corridor. So the Cape corridor and the Ore corridor were ones, I mean, that were able to restart operations relatively quickly. And anything that might be a challenge, I mean, right now, is really a challenge as a result of normal incidents such as weather and everything else that they're experiencing at this point in time. But I will stop there, and Nkosi will go through each of the corridors, including some of the MEs around the table. Thanks.
Thank you, Sizakele. As she has indicated, we really have worked very well with our customers in partnering in our efforts to clear the system, and one has to really extend a word of gratitude to the various industries that have kept us honest and under pressure as we continue to clear the systems. Starting off with the Cape corridor, as Cesar has indicated, much as we had overarching principles that assist us in determining where do we start in clearing the corridors, you find that the dynamics will be different across the various corridors. Starting off with the Cape corridor, within the first hour of the strike being lifted, which was Wednesday evening, the team went immediately in full mode in trying to get the line back in operation, especially with regards to the safety aspects of it. All the line inspections and trolleys were cleared within 12 hours. Rolling stock inspections were cleared within 2 hours, and train preparations for all the trains that were staged in the Cape corridor were concluded within a space of 2 hours as well, meaning that within 16 hours of the strike being lifted in the Cape corridor, we're already in the move. We're able to start clearing trains as and when the opportunity presented itself. Particularly as we cleared the trains, following the principles that Cesar has shared with us across the room, our primary focus was the trains that are blocking the system. We had 48 in our Cape corridor, and all of them have been cleared as we speak now. The only trains that we have in the system right now in relation to the Cape corridor are our daily expected number of trains that we operate on a daily basis, which is sitting at 26 trains as we speak now. The 48 that were blocking the system were all cleared. Then material that was needed, especially to do work on the Ore corridor, as we would have announced, we have a shut coming up in the Ore corridor and needed material then to move. Those trains are in queue and are moving. We have one train already that is en route out of that, and 5 remain being planned in the system to continue. Hazardous materials, and trains that carry cargo that is perishable, especially in the Cape Corridor. You know that a majority of our volumes in the fresh produce space, quite a sizable portion moves via our Cape Town terminals. We had 4 trains in the system in the Cape Corridor. All of them have been moved successfully and are therefore no longer an issue or challenge on our end. And then lastly, we were chasing after trains that may impact other operations such as mining, and we had 2 trains in the Cape Corridor, and all of them have been successfully moved as well. So we can safely say within a space of 48 hours of the strike in the Cape Corridor, we had cleared everything, and we are therefore moving on to stabilizing the system. In terms of our performance catch-up, we continue to put pressure on the rest of the trains that are meant for maintenance. We continue to focus on trains that are going for critical production lines, such as explosives that are needed in the mining industry. We needed ammonia for that, and it's by and large being moved quite efficiently. Moving on to the central corridor, as indicated, the dynamics may be different across the various corridors. Again, in terms of safety, we've ticked all boxes. All trolleys have been concluded. Rolling stock inspections have been concluded. Train preparations have been successfully executed as well. And therefore, we are again in the central corridor in gear to get the trains moving. Unblocking the system, we had 39 trains that were staged across the network in the central corridor. All of them have been cleared. The one big challenge that we remain faced with as a business is cable theft and vandalism, as Cesar has indicated. You find that this moves around the country quite a bit, and at this stage there's a lot of focus on the central corridor with regards to that. And then our performance, of course, at some stage we're sitting at 50% of our ITP. The intention is, as the week progresses, to improve that quite drastically. Our ore corridor, the same. In terms of safety, all boxes have been ticked. And then in terms of unblocking the network, we are running a fluid system as we speak now in the ore corridor. We have 6 trains in the system, which is also by design what you should expect on a daily basis. With regards to recoveries, we are moving quite aggressively maintenance trains as well, just to ensure that the system is maintained as per the needs. We are running at 95% with our ore corridor, and I think as the week progresses, we are nearing that 100%, and we should be sitting at that point. North corridor, which runs mostly our coal volumes. Again, in terms of safety, we've cleared all the trains that would pose safety risks. We've cleared all challenges in relation to the network. There are 2 particular areas that one maybe needs to focus on with regards to the North Corridor. We had 2 derailments in the period of the strike, one in Dumbe and one in Phokeng. Both have been cleared successfully, and the work that is needed in maintaining the line, specifically in those areas, has been executed, and therefore we have a fluid system as well there. With regards to our general freight business trains, we have one that is currently in the system, but that one train started moving as of this morning as well, and therefore by end of today we should have cleared the entire system. Catch-up is well on track, and the system is fully restored as of yesterday, and we are running a fluid system in our North Corridor as well. I'm going to sum the rest up quite quickly in the interest of time. Northeast Corridor, in terms of safety, we've ticked all boxes. In terms of unblocking the network, the Northeast Corridor was impacted by the derailments as well, particularly the Dumbe one. That was cleared immediately as the strike was lifted on Wednesday. By Thursday morning, the Dumbe derailment had been cleared and the system was restored. We run at 90% at this stage with the intention of getting the system back to 100% as the week progresses. With that said, I'd like to pause there and hand over to my colleague Rudzani, who will talk us specifically through the container corridor in terms of recovery and other activities that are taking place within the corridor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bonkosi. So I'm just going to take you through the container corridor. I think as the CE has said, this is one of the corridors that has been heavily impacted we are not yet, fully back on, as you will recall the way she took you through this slide, that the first hour, basically from the time the strike ended till now, we only move about 5 trains. We've got about 23 trains that are still staged. And the reason for that is the continuing cable theft that we've been seeing, more so between Moi River and Lions River. That has been really impacting us, and we have not been able to run our trains successfully. However, what we've since done is that we have, to mitigate the risk or the problem, we've put in diesels. So the diesel locomotives are basically running through that particular area. So we've got 2 lines. One line, we are running pure diesels just to ferry the traffic from the one end to the other, just to try and get rid of these 23 stage trains that are still within the section. So over and above that, we have since also beefed up our security, to make sure that we protect that area quite efficiently. There's been a number of arrests that have been made in that particular area, and also some of the recovery of the cable that have been stolen. So we're hoping that in the next 48 hours, we should start seeing an improvement in that particular area. And I must say, I think already we are starting to see a bit of improvement, because we're coming from an era where there was about 3, if not 4 incidents per day since, we started, the strike was over. We have experienced about 12 kilometers of cable that has been stolen that needs to be repaired. And really that has been really an area where we are really trying to get the system, under control. And you will know that as long as that area is not sorted out, basically the line between Durban and Johannesburg, from a railway operation point of view, is we cannot run trains. So either from Johannesburg or from Durban. So that's really the one of the issues that we are really giving a lot of focus on. But I just thought as well, while I still have the platform, just to touch also on, you will know that as the container corridor, we've recently had floods as well. So from April this year, you'll know the KZN floods. That has had quite a significant impact on our service. We were closed for about 8 weeks, I think from April. I think we only opened the first line on the 12th of June, where we're only having 5 slots that we are running per day, per direction. And the plan was to open the second line end of September, which we've done, which brings us from 5 slots to about 15 slots. But of course, those slots becomes, null and void if we have this problem that I've just mentioned now of the continuing cable theft between Lions River and Moi River. So the plan is that, once we get this under control, we should have 15 slots up and down. And we also should, by end of next year, March, we should then have the full operations back to normality, when our relay room will be fixed, and then we should be having more slots to run between Johannesburg and Durban. So the other part as well that probably will be of interest is the issue of slot sales that we've been working on that particular corridor. You will know that we did announce some time back that we are piloting sales of slots, third-party access into our lines. So I think high-level, update on that is that we are in the evaluation stage as we speak now, and we are hoping that before end of November, let's say by end of November, we should have announced, the preferred operator or operators, on that particular line. So I think let me just pause there, Bongosi, for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rutani. And would like to then open up the floor for any comments and questions and discussions across the room, particularly on the information that we've shared here today. And with that, I'm not quite sure if Yeah, I think let's proceed. Let's proceed if we are able to move around. Yeah. Thanks, ma'am.
Hi there. Helen Reid from Reuters News. Thanks so much for the presentation. I just wondered if you could elaborate a bit on the cable theft increase that you saw during the strike. What were the reasons for that? And could you give us an idea of the level of increase in terms of percentage, how much higher the theft rate was than it has been previously this year?
Thank you. Rosani, if you can tackle that. So perhaps before he comes in, as highlighted earlier briefly, you'll find that the areas that are targeted would differ, across the network. As it stands now, our hardest hit corridors during the period of the strike would be the container corridor and the North Corridor. And Ali is with us online as the managing executive that looks after the North Corridor. We'll start off with Rosani, and then Ali will also come in. Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
Good. So the issue of cable theft has been a continuing problem that we've been experiencing on this particular line. Just to give you an idea of all the cable theft that are happening within Transnet Freight Rail, 44% of that is happening on this line, right? And it so happened that 55% of that 44% is happening on this particular area between Lions River and Moy River. We really are still trying to understand why such a high, theft in that particular area. But I think also what exacerbated the issue was the fact that because of the strike, we have not been able to replace as well, because the people that are supposed to replace were also on strike as well. So we've seen that. But I think with the arrests that have been that we've been making, we are now starting to see a bit of decline. But you will know that these arrests do not come cheap. We have to really employ securities, private securities, to really come and help us, including the police as well, to really come and help us to deal with this scourge.
Thank you. Thanks. I trust your question was answered, Helen. In the interest of time, thank you. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask that we go through 3 questions at a time, just so that we can and maybe try and respond holistically. Some of them may be a duplication, and we can then address them all at once. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Eugene Garrett from Freight News. Surely going into the strike, Transnet could have foreseen there may be an opportunity for an escalation of cable theft, and that contingencies could have been made to prevent that. Yeah. Was that done?
Thank you. We'll note that, and I will ask Eugene, our executive in charge of security, to attend to that. Sorry, Marius, I'm saying Eugene now. If you are looking for a job in the security space, you are welcome. I'll take the second question. Jenkins, thanks.
See, Bones, you can't see me from here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
No,
yeah.
Really Trudy Jones, ENCA. I just wanted to ask a question regarding what we saw last week with an alleged kingpin who's been arrested for actually targeting Transnet pipelines and siphoning fuel from there to their own trucks. He's appearing in court today. Are these would you say that you're now implementing stricter measures to ensure that you can fight theft in Transnet and protect your infrastructure, which is quite important as well? I mean, you look at the State Capture Commission, Transnet was the hub of corruption, and it extensively appears in some of the reports. Would you say that you're strengthening security systems to ensure that the SOE is not compromised by such, a theft as well? Thanks.
Question noted. Thank you. I think we'll tackle a portion of it, and I'll hand over to Marius to tackle the rest. One last question in this round. Thanks, ma'am.
Hi, I'm from News 24. Can we just go back a bit and understand how we got to the strike in the first place? It's the first strike in a decade. an offer of 0% seems to have guaranteed industrial action. Can you give us some flavour of what was done to avert this strike? Thank you.
Thank you. For this one, you see, these are the benefits of sitting here. You can delegate upwards. I'll leave this with the boss to tackle, and as the last question. Perhaps so that I hand over to Marius to deal with all of these at once, especially the first and the second question. Let me first share one or two thoughts on the second one, and then I'll hand over to him. With regards to the arrest relating to the theft of through our pipelines, a lot of detail, of course, will be shared by our sister operating division in Transnet Pipelines, and I'm sure they are engaging in the media as we speak around that. But what one can say is what you saw is an indication of the efforts that are going into ensuring that we secure our infrastructure, and there's a lot of that happening. In fact, there are quite a number of arrests that do not land in the media, even on the rail side. We've really partnered very well with various parties in terms of security. Our customers have come to the party, and mostly private sector is really putting their hands in assisting us in that. So you will see quite a few more of those henceforth. Marius, if you can maybe just tackle the question from Eugene around the escalation and why specifically during this period. Thanks.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I need to put out there is to say that yes, we did anticipate that with the strike there would be escalation, or there could be escalation, and the escalation was not necessarily across the board. So it was specifically in the container corridor in that section. We've seen an escalation, but prior to the strike, we've anticipated this. We've put in a lot of additional resources and to make sure that we are able to deal not just with the picketing and the strikes and whatever. So we've increased our security resources during that period, and we were able to maintain the security cable theft. However, in this specific area, the cable theft has gone up, and we have increased our drone capacity in that area. We've put in a task team with Chopper and Fleur in there. We have put in additional task teams. We've put in observation posts. We've engaged the SAPS. So almost every incident that is happening in that area, we're making an arrest. So it's not that these guys are just going in there, cutting the cable, and they're getting away with it. Our teams are beefed up to make sure that if there is a cable cut, that we are in the area, that we're responding, that we recover the cable, and that we make an arrest. There is also a significant arrest made in terms of one of the dealers that is buying this material. I think it was also reported in the media. So we're following up on the syndicated crime, which is similar to the pipeline incident that is happening. So we've put in a lot of effort also to focus on syndicated crime and close down the market. So it's definitely not that we're sitting back. If you look at all the initiatives that we implemented, and obviously I cannot discuss all of our security initiatives of what we're doing, but if you look at all the initiatives, our year-to-date statistics on incidents has come down with 18%. The length of cable stolen has reduced with 32%. So there is still pockets, there's still huge place for improvement. I'm not saying that the thing is under control, but we are working closely with law enforcement and with beefing up our own security measures. I think one thing that we've said from the start is that Transnet on its own cannot fight this. It's not an isolated Transnet incident. We need the NPA, we need the police, we need all law enforcement on board. And with the establishment of the essential infrastructure task teams, I think we managed to get that right, and we're turning the tide on crime. So it is improving, and it will continue to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Marius. Sizakele?
Yeah, if I could respond from here, I think my voice would be pretty loud if they can listen from here.
They are complaining to one.
Well, Lisa, my simple response to your question is that I'm sure you would equally agree that there's no organization that would have opted to actually take a strike. So in the case of Transnet, we do believe that we did all we could to try and avert the strike. And it's not as if we started to have a conversation with our labor partners, you know, a month or two ago, but there have been ongoing engagements with them and full transparency and openness in respect of the costs that the organization is carrying. And we had hoped that we had formed a partnership where we're working together to try and actually focus on some of the key elements that we all need to focus on in ensuring a sustainable Transnet for going forward. So we had been in constant engagement, and I think you're well aware as well. I mean, if you were keeping up to date with some of the proposals that we're putting on the table, that it wasn't a simple percentage increase only that we were tabling, but we were also tabling a slightly different way of compensating you know, our people at the point at which we thought it would make sense for the organization you know, to make good on closing the gap for them. So unfortunately, I mean, that was not acceptable, and this is why we went the way we did. Because if you recall, I mean, at some point what we had on the table was a proposal where we were talking about, you know, staggered, I mean, payments, which would come into place in December, January, and going into the following year. So it was all trying to just balance, you know, ensuring that we were not increasing the cost to the extent that it may actually end up being more detrimental to the organization, but equally fully acknowledging that, you know, the price of living has gone up, and that our people needed to be recognized, you know, I mean, for that. That's as far as I can tell. I think that, I mean, in terms of, so I'm just answering your question, you know, I think your messaging is more as like, why couldn't we have done all we could to avert the strike? We believe we did. We believe that we were doing all we could. And we thought that we had a partnership where we were engaging with openness and transparency in everything that we're trying to do. But unfortunately, in the end, we found ourselves having to take the strike. Thanks.
Thank you, Sizakele. I think the three questions that have been raised in this round have all been tackled. And with that said, a very... Thank you. A very slight evil voice in my head is saying, I must just continue with the hands in this room, and those that are online must pay for their sins of not coming here. But being the nice person that I am, I will look at pulling the hands that are online as well. We have three hands, one from Terence, David, and Carol, and I'd like to request that they are afforded a platform in that order. Starting off with you, Terence.
Thanks very much for taking the online questions. Could Transnet Freight Rail please give us an overall volume impact from the strike? And then also specifically break it down into coal, iron ore, and general freight business, and compare that to the budget for the year. Is there any potential to claw back, or have the volume budgets now been revised for the year? And secondly, could you quantify in rand terms what the loss is to Transnet as a result of the strike, or Transnet Freight Rail, and what the loss to the economy could have been? Thank you.
Thank you. Noted, Terence. Moving on to David.
Yeah, thank you. If you can hear me okay. Can you quantify the cable theft during the strike, either in volume or in rand terms? And then secondly, do you have a new target for coal deliveries for the year? In other words, just on Terence's question, has there been an adjustment to budget in terms of coal deliveries for the year? And then thirdly, just a more broader question. You will have heard the Minerals Council describing the ongoing issues that TFR is having as tantamount to an escalated crisis. In other words, that the organisation has basically lost lost control in terms of mineral delivery in particular. So if you could just comment on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. My apologies. I think it was David. I did lose you a bit. There was a bit of a network glitch right at the end. If you can capture the last part of your comment.
The last question.
Yeah. Yes, please, sir.
The last question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, that's, the question was about comments made previously by the Minerals Council, which had likened the problems at Transnet to enterprise crime. And I think what they meant by that is that your organisation has lost control, has no ability to recover back.
Noted. Thanks, David. I think we'll leave it at that. The question is noted. The last one in this round will be from Carol. And I'm going to ask Ahmed that we park yours because we are taking three at a time. We'll bring you, give you an opportunity later on. Carol, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Could you, in terms of the locomotives and the trains that were stranded, were any of those locomotives vandalized and kind of stripped of their kind of valuable parts or items or copper or whatever they had? And generally, why is it the case, how does it happen that these new locomotives get vandalized when they're in your care? Could you just explain that? Are they left out on the line? Is that sort of something that happens as a normal practice, or are they all safely secured all the time? And then the second question is to Mrs. Mzimela. I mean, are you still planning to go ahead with that procurement of the 500 locomotives that I think was spoken about by Group CEO a short while ago? Thanks very much. And if so, it's a win. Thank you.
Thank you. In responding to the three questions, I will ask that Marius joins us, especially in relation to our efforts to care for the locomotives during the strike. And of course, I will ask Caesar to talk mostly around the last two questions. But with the first one from Terence around volumes, just keeping in mind that the losses still continue because the system is not running at 100% as it is now. So for every train that we are unable to run as a recovery to the strike, it still counts as volumes that we continue to lose. But during the period of the strike, we actually, in week 29, our operating week, we lost about 47% of our throughput. In week 30, in the midst of the strike, we lost 82% of our volume throughput, and of course, therefore, as we start now seeing an improvement in our ability to move, at the core of the strike, we're executing at about 18% of our total capacity as a business. As I've said, these are the losses that we've computed at this stage based on the weeks of the strike, the actual weeks of the strike. The numbers continue in as much as we try to recover. There are still some losses that are lingering along in the system. Thanks. I'll pause there and hand over to Caesar to talk to the question around the Minerals Council, and then Marius on the vandalism. Thanks.
Yeah, David, thank you, for your question. Your question, was quite broad in terms of talking about all of the mining commodities, but I just want to, clarify so that, we are speaking quite honestly and directly. In terms of ore, frankly, we have no problem whatsoever on the iron ore line. It continues to be the best functioning corridor, actually, even in the world, where we actually run the longest wagon trains on the ore corridor. If you ever want to take the time to Google and you'll find out, that the ore corridor remains the best operating corridor. When it comes to, what has impacted on volumes in respect of ore, we've also been clear that it's the changing weather conditions, where in the last year we had a huge infestation of locusts on the line, and people would ask, what have locusts got to do with impacting locomotives? But effectively, what it does is that it actually created a very slippery surface, and it limited the movements of our trains. But other than that, and some challenges that we equally face in respect of customer improvements that also need to be effected, I think that we do quite well in respect of all. I think the same, for manganese. The manganese, in terms of moving trains, we've also been doing relatively, well. The challenge, with manganese is that the system is fully utilized. And of course, we are on record on saying that we would need to make sure that we build additional capacity because at the moment, there's more movement of manganese, or there's increased movement of manganese on road, simply because our capacity on trains is fully utilized at this stage. It would require, some investment to grow the infrastructure to run more manganese trains. I won't talk to magnetite because nobody really complains too much about magnetite. And let's come to coal, which is always, the big topic of discussion. Equally on coal, we were on record last year to indicate that when it comes to coal, we are challenged as a result of the cancellation of the Chinese, locomotive order when it was suspended, and that as a result we did not have sufficient locomotives to be able to capture the opportunities that existed on coal. Because there are two parts to this challenge. It's what we would have contracted to with our customers, but there's also the lost opportunity to have actually moved a lot more, especially when the price of coal was as high as it was, and still continues to be high even today. So there we were clear, which is why we went back to have a very honest discussion with our customers to say, with all of the challenges that we are experiencing in respect of locomotive availability, we would only be able to move 60 million tons for this current financial year. And I'm explaining in this detail, really just to try and respond to the comment you make about have we lost control. I don't believe we have at all, and I don't think there's anything that demonstrates that we have lost control. There is not a single mining company that has reported, losses in this last year. They continue, to generate, revenue. But I agree completely, and we are fully aligned, together with the Mining Council, by the way, that all of us would have benefited a lot more. And when I say all of us, not only just the customers, TFR as well as Transnet, but most importantly, the economy as well would have benefited had we had the means to be able to move more of the coal volumes at the time at which the prices are as high as they are, currently. Having said that, we equally announced, it's about over a month ago now, that we fondly believe that we're about to find a solution with our two main OEMs, which are the Chinese OEM and BT, both of who supply the electric locomotive to us. But the more significant, positive outcome of the various discussions that have been held over the last couple of months are those that actually relate to the Chinese transaction, because that would allow us to bring back a number of the locomotives that are currently standing, that are short of space, even prior to us bringing additional units into the system. So at this stage, we have in the region of about 311 long-standing locomotives. And they've been long-standing because we do not actually have the spare parts, which are we can only obtain from the OEM to repair those locomotives. So we have enough in terms of number of locomotives in the system, but we don't have enough, in operations, purely because we don't have access, to the space. The latest in principle agreement that has been reached with the Chinese would result in them coming in to assist us to bring back to service the long-standing locos firstly, but also to complete, once everything has been finalized, the outstanding number of locomotives that were part or would have been part of the initial order. So Carol, I hope that also responds to your question as follows. Now that we have actually reached, or we have an in-principle agreement that has been reached with both the Chinese and with Alstom, BT Alstom, we believe that this would allow us to be able to have sufficient locomotives to carry us through at least for the next 3 to 4 years. So at this stage, whilst we still do have intentions to again go out into the open market, with an open market tender for additional locomotives, that will now be held back until we've actually taken full, we've received the full order from the Chinese and from the BT order. But more significantly, this agreement has allowed us the ability to be able to bring back locomotives that we currently pay for, a cost for us, but are currently standing because we just don't have the spare parts to repair them. It's also the reason why, whenever we've tried to explain, when people ask the question, but why does it seem as if the performance is getting worse and not better? And we have to explain that if you're starting off, and I'm going to use a smaller number, but if you start off with 50 locomotives and you start to run short of space, what it means is that by month 2, you have 45 locomotives. By the next month, you have 40 locomotives, and so forth and so forth. So it was absolutely critical to be able to bring in the space, because if in the absence of finding a solution for the spare parts for the long-standing locals, we have more and more that end up parking, which then have a direct impact on what we're able to achieve from a performance perspective.
Thank you, yeah. Marius?
So just to respond in terms of the vandalism of the locomotives, did we anticipate this happening? Yes. When the strike started, it was one of the risks that we've identified, and we have informed our security service providers to significantly increase the security. We followed our procurement processes to increase the security. Obviously, our trains are not meant to stand and be staged all over the country. It's supposed to be moving, and our security is geared up to escort the trains and to protect the infrastructure along the line. So with all the trains that has been staged, it's created an additional security requirement to protect all of these trains. We, in terms of our own procurement processes, as well as the ability of the service providers to rapidly increase the security based on the risk that we've identified, it in some cases that take them a day or 2 or 3 to get those additional resources into the yard. So yes, there has been isolated incidents of vandalism on the locomotives in the first day or 2 of the strike, where after the sites were comprehensively secured, and we managed to stop that. Those investigations is also underway, internal investigations, because of the fact that we have alerted the service providers of this risk, and it still happens. So that's internal processes that we will be taking up with those service providers in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Marius. Thank you, Sizakele. I think we've covered all 3 questions that came up in this round. Perhaps just in addition to what Marius has said, it is key that we perhaps note that when we talk about long-standing locomotives, we are not talking about locomotives that are long-standing as a result of purely vandalism. Of course, some locomotives break during the course of operation, and the reason why then they will be long-standing is, as I said, if the parts are not available for them to put back into operations. The notion that we are breaking our own assets through vandalism and therefore parking them is completely inaccurate, and one needs to put that forward, that it is during the course of operations that you'll find that these things happen. With that said, I am getting a bit of a look here to the colleagues online for focusing on you. I'll maybe take the last question online and then come back to the room to see if there are any further hands. Ahmed, your hand has been up for a while, but I do note that there is a hand up, perhaps before Ahmed comes in, from Ali, who might want to add from a corridor perspective, especially in the North Corridor that carries coal, which Cesar touched on. I think Ali might want to have one or two additional points to make, and then we'll move on to Ahmed. Ali, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mongos. We learned last week, Carol, in the discussion with you, that context matters. So I thought that it's important that on this issue of vandalism, that we qualified just a little bit. Your question was about locomotives being vandalized in our care, which creates the impression that they were vandalized while standing. Certainly on the North Corridor, for example, at least 5 of the 7 locomotives that were vandalized while moving on trains by people throwing things at the locomotives. So the word vandalism must also have a complete context. In the context of the strike, it's quite different to security incidents.
Yeah. Thank you, Ali. I think the point is made quite clear. Thanks for that. Moving on to Ahmed, the last hand online, and then we'll check in for hands here in the room. Over to you, sir. Mr. Ahmed, we can tell you are unmuted, but we are not getting sound on our end. Okay, we'll afford you an opportunity to figure out your technicals on your end, but in the interim, let's have a look if there are any last round of hands here around the room. We already. You see now with the online, you can tell who's up first. This time around, I'll have to go any, money more. Given that it's a first question, I'd like to start with you, ma'am, and then we'll come back to the ladies. Thank you. Sorry, the name again? Thank you.
My question is related to money, obviously. I would like to know how much is required in order to get corridors back up and running. We spoke about the cable theft there. How much is needed in order to get that back up and running? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. How much is required in terms of funding to get the corridors up and running? Okay. I'll ask Rutsani to briefly touch on that. Ladies, you can go first. Lisa.
This idea of levies came up in the strike. I mean, is this something that will be revisited to try and fund this additional wage cost on railing customers at least? And please, can we get a revised estimate on the North Corridor? Can't be 16 million pounds a year anymore, can it?
A revised target for the North Corridor. North Corridor revised target noted. Thank you.
Hi, sorry, this is coming back to my earlier question. I just wondered if you could give me an indication of, you said that there was a big jump in cable theft during the strike. If you could give me an indication of whether it was double the average or 3 times the average, or a kind of to quantify that.
Thank you. I'll ask Rutsani, particularly on the Cape Corridor, to give an indication of that as well. Let me just check in again one last time with Ahmed to see if your system is up and running now, sir.
Thanks very much. Can I be heard now?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. 2 questions briefly. Are there any employees that still haven't signed the new offer? And secondly, can Transnet afford any more operational delays after the one of this team? Thanks very much.
Okay, let me just note that. Employees that have not signed, and number 2. Sorry, can you repeat the second part, Ahmed?
The second one was, can Transnet afford any more operational delays after the one of this team?
Thank you. I'll pause there and just check in. I see there are 2 further hands here in the room. I'd like to ask that we pause and attend to the 4 questions that we have now, and then we'll come back to the 2. Given that majority of these will require your attention, Rutsani, I'd like to ask that you kick us off The one from Nondumiso around funding, the second one around the North Corridor, the big jump in cable theft, particularly in your corridor, just to indicate what the impact was, and then we'll come back to the other two questions. Thanks.
Thanks. So, with regards to, I'm gonna sort of like give a bit of a longish answer, but to try and get to your answer, to your question rather. If we look at, there's a place basically between Ladysmith and Pietermaritzburg. That's where our biggest hotspot is. The tally that we've done in terms of how much it will take us to actually, fix that, I think we put in, it's about 24 million that for us to replace the wire, just as to replace the wire. But I think what we need to take note of is that there's quite a big backlog of work that needs to be done on the entire corridor. So over and above just replacing the wire is not the solution. There's many other things that need to be done in terms of, signaling system that has been stolen, vandalized as well. I think we took an opportunity, I think it was end of last year sometime, where we took media, on a trolley, just to show them, the impact of, vandalism and theft, and also the impact of people encroaching into our servitudes, the impact that it has in terms of train movements. So I think maybe let me leave it there, but if we were to tally everything, it really goes into, and if you look at even some of the backlog that we have on maintenance, it goes into billions of rands. So just to answer the question on the theft. So remember the theft has been on the container corridor and has been continuing for some time, right? And if we look at only from the time the strike started till the strike ended, we've lost 12 kilometers of cable. Right, so, and I think for those of you who will normally drive to Durban, if after the capture site sign, you go towards Sidara, if you look on your left-hand side, you will see there's two lines. One line is completely stolen, so the lines are literally hanging. That's the hotspot area that we have, the Moy River area. That's where we're really having some serious problem. But the bigger problem, as I've said, is between literally from Ladysmith all the way to Pietermaritzburg. But 12 kilometers of cable, and we're still counting even now.
Thanks. Thanks, Rutsani. And just in addition to that, just for context, we are looking at a 22% increase in cable theft incident, particularly cable theft, just on the container corridor alone. So there really was a big jump if you look at it in that terms.
Over the course of the strike.
Over the course of the strikes, yes. To Lisa's question around the levies, there were offers that were put out by customers. It wasn't an initiative that was coming from the Transnet side. It was more from the customer side that the customers were raising their hands and saying they want to come to the party. But particularly those were focused with our sister company, TPT. It was more on the shipping side that we were finding that there hadn't been any that were offered to us as the rail operator, and therefore I'm hoping that our colleagues from TPT are addressing that quite extensively, because I'm sure those are ongoing conversations as we speak now. But having said so, and perhaps to your question, and it triggers another discussion that one is having with our customers as a rail service provider. In our assessment over time, as a commercial entity, we've been assessing our ability to sustain as a business, and what we've found is there are many of our services that we offer that are being offered at below cost. Some of it could be as a result of strategies that were implemented in the past that were not reviewed to say how do we then take them forward. But we found that quite a few of our flows, if you want to call them that, are grossly under recovery. And therefore we've ventured into a process where we are engaging our customers to say, we can't continue to offer a service that we are not at least recovering cost on. And there's a lot of work that is being done around that. There are conversations with the various industries around that. Of course, for the sustainability of our service offering, in order to ensure that we run a predictable and direct service to our customers, we do need to recover cost of offering that service. So we will continue to engage the customers, and if there are any developments along that, we will also perhaps then be out in the open with that bit more detail. And lastly, to the question around the impact of the strike, particularly on the North Corridor and coal, and the target of 60 million tons, Ali, I'd like to request that you step up and take this one. Basically, in summary, the question is, are we still